Michael, welcome to CFO at Home. Thanks for your time today.
No, thank you. Thanks, Vince. Happy to be on.
Over the years on this podcast, I have been very clear that I am not a fan of a lot of the things that I see in the financial media and also a lot of the financial influencers on social media, specifically what they teach us about investing. A lot of it, in my opinion, is it's sensational, it's reactive, and it leads people to making investment decisions emotionally. And fear and greed is what you talk about a lot in terms of emotions and investing. There's no Wall Street saying financial markets are driven by two powerful emotions, greed and fear. And in the related to that, Warren Buffett, the famous saying that he has, be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others
Mhm.
are
Yeah.
fearful. So taking that contrarian approach into the markets, but the problem is neither the media nor a lot of what social media is encouraging you to be contrarian. It's actually encouraging you to roll with that greed or the fear that's being stoked. I noticed that in your process and what you teach, you encourage people to figure out their own investing
Mhm.
style as opposed to following the lead of what they get through the financial media or social media, that kind of thing. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. The big thing to keep in mind, especially when you're trying to follow somebody else's process, or I don't even say conventional advice, or especially social media. Social media has a lot of scary advice there. Especially for people who are actually successful in investing, you don't actually get to learn what made them successful. Typically, there is something that happened in their background, in their childhood, an experience that happened, and also works really well with their personality. You mentioned contrarian. Value investing is a really big way of investing that's really focused on. That's a contrarian view. That person typically has a contrarian mindset in other areas in their life. So it goes hand in hand. So if, for example, I bring up this idea of the Buffett trap, don't fall into the Buffett trap. Don't just try to copy off what Buffett does in investing. Unless you too, at a young age, got into horse race betting and then somehow finagle your way to be work under your mentor post college in the exact same way, and are even interested in some entrepreneurial endeavors, perfect. Then follow Buffett to a T. Otherwise, there is an element of you need to find yourself. And once you find yourself, find what you believe in, figure out your own biases, you might even recognize you're not even really a value investor. You might be more of a growth investor. I'm not saying follow social media, but some of
Sure.
the things might hit the nail on the head more for you. So you have to take the time to figure that out. And that is something that I preach in terms of focus on finding your own philosophy. Don't just go after somebody else's process.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about that. I'm sure listeners get the concept there, but particularly for listeners who may be novice investors who were maybe this close to just following what Warren Buffett says or following what their favorite influencer says, let's break that down a little bit more in terms of how we can go about developing our investment
Yeah,
philosophy.
and it can even go over to broader finance in general, especially budgeting, things of that nature. It can broaden out. So this is where the idea of cross-domain expertise comes in. So I'll give it a little bit about myself. In my prior life, I was an institutional investor, and I actually started sophisticated investing life all the way back in 2018 with the idea of being like Robert Smith. Hey, I'm learning how the best are investing. I'm gonna share with you the best practices. And that didn't stick. And that didn't even stick with me personally. For some reason, I struggle to follow my own advice. That's a problem. That's a problem. That's a problem.
Hate it when that happens.
So yeah, that's where this idea of taking some of your beliefs and where you see other things that other people don't see from another domain comes into play, because you can pull from one domain and just take the bones of these are where I have contrarian views or differentiated views. These are the reasonings behind that differentiated view, and then you can pull that over into investing. Now, It's a little tricky to do, but pretty much all or most of the successful investors you can think of have done that. Warren Buffett is that. Like I mentioned before, people don't really think about his investing experience really came from horse race betting. His partner, Charlie Munger, it was poker, playing poker while he was in the Navy. And that's how he thinks about sizing positions. So you got, and I can go down the list, plenty of more. Even Robert Smith, I already brought him up. I saw what he did for private equity, and I completely missed that. Oh no, he was an engineer first, so he had an engineering mind. So that's how he was able to see how to approach enterprise software companies in the first place. But yeah, it starts. Yeah, it
Oh,
starts there. So there's a domain that you have to care about, and you have to at least have some takes. But I don't think that's that hard for most people to get around once they find what that domain is, their hobbies, their interest, things of that nature. So yeah, you got to start there and then
right.
move over.
Yeah, so I'm applying that to myself. My background, if I look at the way I was raised by Depression era World War II
Hmm.
parents, I naturally came into this thing with a fair amount of conservatism. I would say that at heart, I'm a conservative investor. Now, by learning more about investing and how it works, refined my definition of what a conservative investor is. Basically, if you're going to be an investor, you may want to shy away from excessive market
Hmm.
risk, but you also have to get a certain level rate of return if you're saving for something like retirement, just so inflation didn't punch you in the
Exactly.
face. So by really understanding how to be a conservative investor, and stuffing all of your money under a mattress is not conservative investing. It's not investing. As a matter of fact, you're taking the biggest risk of all because there's no way you're going to be able to keep up with inflation that way. I consider myself to this day a conservative investor, and it all goes back to that background. So I can see that. How did that work out with you doing that self examination? And I'm assuming you personally did that kind of self examination. How did that influence your investment philosophy?
Yeah, it actually starts all the way back towards the end of 2021. It started with a conversation with my dad. And it's funny you bring up conservative investing. He is conservative in money and finances in general. And he was talking about options trading. And are you kidding me? I was like, what? No way. Because one of my cousins was doing really well. And he was like, maybe. I'm like, this is definitely not you. But
Yeah, and let's level set the conversation for the listener. Just give us a quick definition or an idea of what options trading
yes.
is.
So if we go back, options, they're supposed to be a known as a derivative of stocks, or essentially they get the pricing and a lot of the mechanics from the underlying stock. So let's say that you own 100 shares of Apple. You can own 100 shares of Apple outright at the current price, or you can essentially buy what I'll call more like upside insurance. If the stock goes above a certain level, you can pay a much smaller price for 100 shares of Apple for the right, the opportunity, but not the obligation to buy at a higher price. So it's a little bit like that. It's almost
Right.
like insurance in a way. If you dive a little bit deeper into social media and financial media in general, you hear a lot of more negative on options than positive, especially how people can take
Right.
that ultimately to the highest form of speculation.
And speculation, I think, is the key
Yeah.
word there. So some of our listeners rather, are saying, "Tell me more," and the other have zoned out because it's a Charlie Brown teachers thing. But I think the important thing is option trading, as far as the risk level in different ways you can
Sure.
trade. Options trading is up there in terms of just the amount of risk that
Yes, it's extreme. It's an extreme amount of risk, especially how it's typically taught and how normal individuals actually trade them, which is why it was so off putting to hear my dad bring this up. But at the same time, I've given him advice before, and the advice I gave him again was I sticking to it myself. Beginning of 2022, I was like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I'm in this job. I got to start figuring out my own investment process. Again, I was focused on process at first. I was looking for a podcast for one of my industry friends, and I came across a podcast by this guy named Joe Pita. He was being interviewed, And he was talking about he used to work on Wall Street, lost his job right around the great financial crisis, but he was still good at his job. Got into a really bad accident right when he was about to start a new hedge fund. And he loves baseball analytics in particular. So he couldn't necessarily do his typical job as a trader, but he essentially started his own quote unquote baseball hedge fund. He was betting on games, he was sports betting, and he was taking a lot of lessons he learned from that Wall Street world. He applied them to, to betting on baseball at a very successful clip. So that sparked something in my mind. Baseball is not my thing, but basketball is. So I started to look at my own views on basketball. It started again, focus on the process and learning a little bit more about basketball, even revisiting some takes I've had in the past. We might even go down a rabbit hole trying to revisit some of those takes. We'll save that if we need it. But the big thing I was doing this thing about the process, and then I recognized no, there's something bigger. There's something bigger here in terms of my beliefs. The beliefs are the driver. The process are just they just fall out of the beliefs. And what really stuck there is there's this exercise that I had to do in my former role. And I'm in my coaching program, I bring this up. It's called the 4 Ps framework. It's a way that we used to analyze potential hedge fund managers to figure out is this manager actually had a chance of outperforming whatever benchmark? Because most don't. We see all the stats. Most are pretty bad.
Right.
But there are a few that actually can. And they normally do really well in this 4 Ps process, which is philosophy, process, performance, and people. But the first P is philosophy. And that's the one that can explain everything else. If the philosophy makes sense, then everything else flows through. So in learning how to invest or just figuring out what your beliefs are in other domains, you start to strip that down and you recognize that there's maybe certain biases that stick out, or they're just you can just see certain things that other people cannot see in this domain. And there is a way you can transfer that over, and now you can apply that to investing. It doesn't necessarily always have to be picking stocks, although that's the main thing I talk about. It can be in other ways, maybe just in just generally allocating your portfolio, thinking about certain aspects. Because once you find that and it sticks with your inner belief, you can stick to it. That's what I'm really preaching. You need to be able to stick to something, especially when the times get tough.
Right. Yeah. The
Yeah.
consistency. So, really, a part of developing this philosophy is because whether it's a conservative philosophy at its core, whether it's more aggressive, that consistency is easier to maintain if it's something that is aligned with your beliefs as opposed to, oh crap, I'm doing this because Warren Buffett did it and it's not turning out so well. You're a little bit more likely to bail on it if it's Warren Buffett's idea as opposed to something that you can relate to in your life, maybe something that you have stuck
Hmm.
to throughout up and down cycles. I noticed that on your site when you're talking about the philosophy and again relating it back to baseball or basketball, you phrase it as thinking more like a general manager. Tell us a little bit more about break that down for us a little
Yeah.
bit.
So this is where my beliefs start to kick in. That's where my beliefs start to kick in. Did you watch or maybe basketball fan at all? NBA fan, a little bit, a little
Yeah.
bit. Okay. During the beginning parts of COVID, The Last Dance. Did you watch that documentary?
Oh,
Definitely.
definitely,
Okay,
definitely.
perfect. If we remember in The Last Dance, there's a it's a great show of resilience. Awesome show of wow, this it took a lot to win back to back, especially that last year. It also
All
it
right.
also made it very clear who everybody believes the villain is. Jerry Krause made it very clear. I don't think that's true.
Right.
I don't think that's true at all. I actually think Jerry Krause is a genius. Not as much a genius he wants to be. Organizations don't win championships. I'm not going to go that far. But the
Right.
idea
Right.
of yes, you need to find and work with star players. So you need to find your main stocks that you really love in a portfolio. But it's more about how do you build a team around that stock, and what are you aiming for when trying to build that team. There is a level of what I would call smart diversification. And what I mean by smart diversification is the best way to beat the market is actually to aim for a symmetry. What I mean by symmetry is you can think of it either in an upside or a downside case. In upside, when the markets are up, you're outperforming. And if the markets are down, you're not underperforming by nearly as much. And vice versa. Markets are down, you're outperforming. Markets are up, you're underperforming, but you're keeping up. So you create the symmetry. That's another way of thinking about trying to build a complete and complementary team to whatever the star is. So that can be a star on an NBA team, or that can be the stars in your portfolio. Now you need to be able to identify that. But one big thing for me is the importance of portfolio management. It is not taught in school. I'm a professor. I'm not teaching it to the level I want to teach it. It's definitely something that most stock pickers, professional investors, don't really have the tools. They don't really actually know how to put together a portfolio and not recognizing that's the real key to outperforming. If that's your goal, I recognize with me,
Right.
that's my goal. That's what actually keeps me interested. It's not an absolute number, it's the relative number. So if it's similar, then yeah.
There's so many different ways that you can go about applying that philosophy because I was just thinking about somebody listening to this that I don't know, may not be an investor, but they play a lot of Madden, for example. I haven't played Madden in years. I think it's a lot more sophisticated than it was back in
Very
my
true.
day. I go all the way back to Tecmo
Wow.
Bowl. But you understand that a lot of what you can do in these video games is you're building
Yes.
rosters in addition to a player. So anybody who plays games in that way would be able to strongly relate to the analogy that you're talking
Yes.
about here. I would even say, and that applies to fantasy football, probably applies sports betting. I'm careful about making that
I
analogy
understand.
because
I'm with you there.
sports betting is betting,
Yeah.
but a serious sports bettor is doing a lot of analysis in terms of rosters and injuries and all that type of thing. A person who maybe that's their hobby and they spend a lot of time at it. They may not know it, but they're also building investment
Yes.
muscles while they're enjoying themselves.
Correct. Exactly. And let's take a we can even go dive deeper on fantasy football to and because there's a drafting piece. You got to have a drafting strategy early on, and then throughout the season, when to place trades, and even when you have certain matchups with somebody else, you're looking at their roster and you're thinking about should I use this running back against this opponent, or he's using that running back against that opponent? Should I make a switch versus what I think I will normally do? So it's a back and forth. So yeah, and especially if you're actually pretty good at fantasy football and
Right.
you know how to figure that out, you
Right.
can figure out, okay, this is why I'm good. This is why I believe, and this is why I've been successful here. Now let me pull this over to my financial life and investing.
And if my philosophy in Madden is to construct a very conservative, more running
Mhm.
based
Yeah.
offense, yeah, that says something about me in terms of I'm more of a grinder. I'm a little bit more conservative, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. Where if I'm going to build, oh, I don't know, a Texas Tech style offense, it's going to air it out a little bit more. Then maybe that says I am a little bit more of a risk taker.
Yeah, to an extent. Now we need to air it out a little bit more. We don't need to talk about Texas Tech football right now. We're still recovering, but it was still a good season. But yes, it does. It ties in. It ties in. And yeah, what the typical route you would take in whatever that domain is, and especially if you again, and this is where maybe some self reflection helps, and it's hard to do because we don't really sit down and think in this way in terms of this is an interest I really have. This is a hobby I really have. This is what I think is why I believe I'm different. Why I see things differently. So you, so the point of the me having a coaching program is to help with that. But yeah, that's the step that needs to be made. Once you make that step, and then you can find a way. There's a way you can tie in. Again, there's a lot of like common biases known in investing or like just in life in general. That's probably a really great place to start. Figuring out what these common biases are in investing. It's loss aversion, it's simplicity bias, it's anchoring, extrapolation, all these words mean something. Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, break down one or two of those. Some were more self-explanatory than others, but like anchoring, for example, break that
Yeah.
one down.
So a big piece that you always have to think about, I do subscribe to the idea that there is a personality difference between value and growth investors. Or another way you can think of it is the more conservative in stock picking and the more aggressive in stock picking. Anchoring is the idea of you when you learn about a company or even you do an analysis, you see that company in that state, in this one state. That also includes the valuation. You see the valuation as X. If the company goes above that valuation or the company does improve, and you are not going to necessarily just move over and be like, all right, great, this company's doing better, they deserve a higher valuation, for example, I should pay up more than normal. So this is something a more conservative investor would struggle with. What they will prefer is, I see that the company's been they've been trading at this certain valuation. Right now they're here, they're below, but they should be here. This is what they've been in the past, but they're below. Now I'm going to find out why they're below, but if I believe it's not justified, I'm going to invest hoping they get back here. But the struggle is, this is your anchor. So if it goes above, you're not interested. You don't believe it should be interested. You always believe it should be below.
Okay,
So so
gotcha.
so yeah, there are, yeah, you can just do just a random, it's I was gonna say you can do a random search, but it's really just anything related to really behavioral sciences, behavioral economics, behavioral
All right.
finance, down that path. But it's very good for taking, it's like the bridge between, these are my beliefs, these are my differentiated views in this domain, and this is why I probably have them. It's normally the biases, and the biases can be carried over into investing.
And we can identify, if we're in the sports, we can identify those biases by using that sports
Mhm.
analogy. But I would imagine, regardless of what your interest is in life, there's a way to use that analogy, that thing that you're passionate
Yes.
about, because that thing that you're passionate about is the thing where your biases and preferences all shows
Yes.
up.
Exactly.
I have no idea how this will work, for example, but I'm sure if you're really into knitting, yeah, somewhere
I believe so. Yeah. No,
there
you're right.
yeah, somewhere, somehow you can relate that to an investment
Yes.
philosophy. Now, is that what is that a part of what you do in your coaching? Do you help people walk through this process of doing, I guess, the self-analysis to find that, is it my knitting? Is it my baseball coaching for little league? Finding my thing and then walking that up to develop their own investment philosophy?
Yes, it is part of the coaching process. Although I have experienced that most people know what the thing is. They know what the thing.
There ain't that much analysis.
Yes, that part is typically, they have a clear frame of mind what they want to do. Yeah,
Gotcha.
and then from there it is more of an exercise of, yeah, what are those beliefs? What are those differentiated beliefs? I help them connect the biases, and then I help them build out their own 4 Ps. Build out the philosophy a little bit more, how it connects to investing, especially for whatever their goals are, then how to create a process around that. When you're looking at performance, what should you be judging? Because a big thing, and I can speak this for myself as somebody who fell into the Buffett trap, the idea of when you're underperforming, that's when you get scared away. That's when you get scared out the market. At least for myself. So that was the big thing that I have to get over. And part of that is, you're going to underperform in time. You can't outperform at all times. You're not going to hit your goals at all
Right.
times, but it is the you need to stick with it. So understanding that, and the people thing is really more like resources. What are the resources you use? I help you build that out. And I also, there's a huge part of the process, which is experimentation. So it's mainly a 12-month coaching program. The first 2 to 3 months, I'm helping you with the foundation and really build out that those 4 Ps. And then it takes, the rest of the time is really experimentation. You need to find yourself, because you're going to put some things down that you think you want to do or you think you care about, but you don't. It doesn't move you the same way. And a lot of experimentation is a lot more of a intuition or gut feel.
So, is the program more for people who are interested in being active traders, or is there something to be gained by the person who, let's say, has a 401k that they're not looking to actively invest, but they do need to do things like pick asset allocation, pick individual ETFs and mutual funds, that type of thing? Can Is the course also for that person, or is it mainly for active investors, active
So
traders?
it's for both. It does lean more towards active investing, those who want to do it in their personal brokerage account. But asset allocation is a big part of it as well. I just brought up the idea of portfolio management. Asset allocation is essentially a portfolio management skill. So that is an element of it. The coaching program, in a lot of ways, uh, this sounds like it's a negative, but I consider myself to be this person too, an insecure overachiever. That's who it's for. That's what it's for. I'm talking about myself. Somebody who maybe lean a little bit too much on accomplishment and achievement as external validation. That's the driver. And yes, that's a good driver, a decent driver for a professional life, but it can hold you back personally and can hold you back financially. This whole aspect is to help me stay invested during the tough times so I can actually get to the wealth goals that I want to get to. So it's more for that person, and that person is typically interested in picking stocks at the bare minimum.
Right,
But it
right.
can also just be asset allocation. It can just be that. That can be a part of it as well.
So this may be for the ideal client, may be a person who, reflecting back on your phrase there, insecure overachiever. So that may be someone who is professionally overachieving, let's say, in their given field, but yet they're still insecure about investing, and maybe they're trying to hold themselves to the same standard of investing as they do in their professional life. So if you're a doctor and you're a very gifted doctor, you graduated high in your graduating class, you really haven't taken a lot of L's. Let me just put it like that. So this whole idea of investing, where by design, in the long run, you're going to win, but along the road, you're going to have to take your L's. It's a different
It is.
mindset. So, is that just an example of maybe the type of person who would get the most benefit?
Yeah, that's an example. I will add that this person became a doctor mainly maybe because their parents wanted them to become a doctor, the social group they're in, this was the approved route to go. They really lean on others people's approval and guidance to get there. They
Ah,
never
okay.
truly
Okay, that's good.
developed their own feel, their own conviction, their own confidence, their own internal scoreboard. They haven't developed that yet.
Right, right.
So I
So, even the field that they went into, they were basically following a template that was laid out for them and not based on their own philosophy, so to
yes,
speak.
you this is all about building up your own trust in yourself. Trust in what
Wow.
you yes, this is what the secret here is. It's bigger than investing. That's the yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. I can see people taking this course thinking it's going to make them a better investor. It makes them a better investor, but it can have like bigger ramifications on their life. That's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
I have the saying, master yourself, master the market, master life. That's the thought. So I'm gonna help you with the mastering yourself and master the market, and then the mastering the life. You'll see the benefits. You'll see the dividends over time from just so
Right.
yeah. That's the idea.
Yeah. 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 It's a
Yeah,
launching pad. That's interesting. And right now, as we speak, there's a waiting list for the course, correct?
correct. So part of that is being an actual professor. I want to make sure I have the time to actually give the necessary resources because it's more of a hybrid coaching program where yes, there is some pre-recorded videos there, but almost just like you're back in school, you're going to do assignments and I'm going to video record giving you feedback and helping guide you along the way and also have office hours. So I wait for times in my schedule where I can pull this off and won't get in the way with the rest of my schedule. So, of course, at least now, spring break ish time frame is what I'm looking at. So yes, building the waiting list for those that are interested until now. Once that time frame comes and it's ready to for open for enrollment, then yes, those who are interested definitely enroll. And even have a conversation. We can even have a conversation over the phone beforehand, see if this actually is a program right for you. And if so, we can move forward and really get this process started. And people finding themselves. That's, yeah, like I mentioned before, it's the hidden thing here. It's not just about investing, it's a broader thing I'm going for. I'm just bringing you in, starting with investing.
Wow. So that's a lot of bang for the buck for that course. I'll tell you. So your website is sophisticatedinvestinglife.com. We'll link that to the show notes. We'll also include the specific link for that waiting
Yes.
list. I think those are the two big takeaways for our audience today. Anything else about the course before we wrap it up that you'd like to share?
The big thing, and I brought this up, there's an experimental phase. What I have found is that people really struggle with experimenting, i.e., struggle with failing. People struggle with failing on this is, again, this is why I'm touching on a specific person. If you're somebody who has struggled in failure, even small failures, small L's, we all take L's in life. I'm giving you the environment to fail. It's the big idea here is you need to slow down before you can speed up. It took me over 2 years, hundreds of hours of failing before it finally clicked. And once it finally clicked, and I knew how to actually put it all together, then that's when I recognized there is something here. And this isn't just about, again, this is just not about reaching your wealth goals. It's about reaching the broader things in life that you were meant to reach. So that's probably the last thing I want to bring up. Don't be a huge part of this is, yeah, you're going to fail along the way, but there's small L's for the bigger W that's out there.
And again, I just want to emphasize for the listeners that we started our conversation off talking about social media influencers and media people. You have the credentials
Yeah.
to teach this. We mentioned Texas Tech. You are a professor at Texas Tech teaching finance, I believe.
Yes. So yes, main course I teach is the Student Managed Investment Fund here. So yeah, the
Okay.
students actually are pitching stocks to be part of a $4 million portfolio that I oversee.
Okay. All right. There you go. So you're not some Yahoo on TikTok telling people how to invest. You're not even on TikTok.
Exactly.
It's, we discussed that a little earlier. But yeah, just again, wanted to emphasize the credentials. So, Michael, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I've had a fair amount of podcasts on investing throughout the years, but I really haven't spent this much time talking about the psychology
Mhm.
of it, and that is so much of this. And again, I love your concept of being able to make investing more relatable to the individual investor by drawing analogies with things they're already comfortable with, which is something I have done throughout my life and didn't even think about it.
Yeah.
It's a great approach. Thanks for your time. Thanks for being on CFO at Home today.
Vince, thank you so much. I appreciate the time.